Let me ask you something, as a fan like you. What if the next draft isn't about adding more shine, but about finally fixing what's been silently hindering this team's success? We all know the offense can score. We trust the quarterback. We trust the coaching staff. But when the games get tight in January, wouldn't it be different if the defense could simply take control? If they could pressure with 4 players, force turnovers, and close out games without needing miracles? That's the kind of scenario we're considering. A draft that could completely change this team's attitude. Stronger, faster, more aggressive. The kind of move that not only helps this year, but sets the tone for the next 5. Now, I want to know your opinion. Would you invest everything in building a dominant defense, or would you still focus on adding more firepower to the offense? Leave your opinion in the comments. And, if you're excited about this offseason's bold signings, click the like button. Without further ado, let's get straight to the point. The discussion immediately turned serious. Both hosts acknowledged they had taken him in previous simulations, but this wasn't about repetition. This was about value and need aligning perfectly. Bain, widely viewed as one of the premier edge rushers in the class, represents exactly what Kansas City lacks. An explosive, high-motor defender who can bring attitude to the defensive line room. There are questions about his arm length, something that will be scrutinized heavily at the combine. But Chris Clark made it clear. Tape trumps measurements. Bain's hand-fighting, burst, and relentless approach suggest he can overcome any perceived limitations. And more importantly, he brings something intangible this defense has been missing. Edge. Not just edge as a position. Edge as an identity. The Chiefs' biggest need, as emphasized in the show, isn't defensive tackle, it's defensive end. Yes, interior depth matters. Yes, the one-tech role can be filled with rotational players. But if you can't consistently generate pressure with 4, you're playing defensive football on hard mode. Seattle proved years ago that winning with a 4-man rush changes everything. Kansas City has managed to survive without elite 4-man pressure, but survive isn't the standard anymore. Selecting Ruben Bain at 9 would signal a philosophical commitment. We are going to attack quarterbacks again. And they didn't stop there. When the board reset at pick 40, the conversation turned bold. With several top-edge prospects already off the board, including players like Cassius Howell and Kelrick Falk, the urgency didn't fade. It intensified. Rather than pivot away from the position, the hosts debated doubling down. Gabe Yakus emerged as the name. Not a consensus top-tier star, but a high-graded prospect in Ryan Tracy's athletic matrix system. An 80-plus grade, a player with legitimate upside, and suddenly the idea became irresistible. Why take one edge when you can take 2? Think about that for a second. George Karlaftis sliding inside more often. Chris Jones working with fresher legs. Ashton Gillott developing in year 2. Now add Bain and Yakus to that rotation. That's waves. That's relentless pressure. That's depth that allows Steve Spagnuolo to stay creative without overexposing the secondary. Chris Clark pointed out something that fans sometimes forget. You can never have too many pass rushers. Injuries happen, rotations matter, and in January, football, legs win games. By the end of day 2 in this simulation, the Chiefs had secured 2 edge defenders and added tight end Max Clare, a player viewed as one of the better second-tier options behind the top tight end prospect in the class. With Travis Kelce nearing the twilight of his career, the need to quietly prepare for the future is real. Clare offers developmental upside without forcing a first-round gamble. But here's where things get even more interesting. On day 3, instead of chasing flashy offensive skill players, the focus remained on defensive identity. Safety Bud Clark, a ball hawk with 15 career takeaways in college, became the selection at pick 109. With uncertainty around Brian Cook's future, the logic was straightforward. Inject playmaking into the back end. By the time the draft wrapped, Kansas City had added Bryce Lance and running back Kalen Black, a home run-capable weapon who flashed explosiveness on the national stage. Not a feature back immediately, but a change-of-pace threat that forces defenses to respect speed. And that's the theme here. Speed, pressure, turnovers. This wasn't a finesse draft. This was a tone-setting draft. If free agency addresses wide receiver and possibly right tackle, this class becomes even more intriguing. Suddenly, the defensive line looks younger, hungrier, deeper, and perhaps most importantly, more volatile for opposing quarterbacks. Now imagine this defense with legitimate four-man pressure again. Imagine Spagnuolo dialing up disguised coverages, knowing he doesn't have to manufacture blitzes to create chaos. Imagine January football at Arrowhead with waves of pass rushers coming at opposing quarterbacks. That's what this simulation hints at. But here's the real question, and I want you to think about this carefully. If Ruben Bain is truly sitting there at 9, do you sprint the card to the podium, or do you consider trading back and gambling on value? And how aggressive should Kansas City be in doubling down at edge the way this mock draft did? And here's where this entire projection becomes even more fascinating. Because when you zoom out and look at the full picture of what was built in this simulation on Locked On Chiefs, you begin to see a philosophical pivot that could quietly redefine how this roster is constructed around Patrick Mahomes in the next phase of contention. This wasn't just about plugging holes. It was about correcting structural imbalance. For years, the Chiefs have relied on creativity, coaching brilliance, and Mahomes' generational talent to overcome defensive inconsistencies. Steve Spagnuolo has done remarkable work manufacturing pressure. But the honest truth, and Chiefs fans know this, is that when Kansas City can rush with 4 and drop 7, they become terrifying. That's what this draft attempted to restore. By doubling down on edge with Ruben Bain at 9 and Gabe Yakus at 40, the organization would be sending a message. We are not waiting for development. We are accelerating it. Bain brings immediate starter potential. Yakus brings rotational disruption. Together, they create internal competition with George Karlaftis and Ashton Gillotte. And competition breeds performance. Think about what that does in training camp. You're no longer penciling in roles out of necessity. You're forcing players to earn them. You're rotating aggressively. You're keeping Chris Jones fresher in December and January. You're allowing Karlaftis to kick inside in certain packages, creating mismatches against guards. Suddenly, the defensive front is not predictable. It's flexible, and flexibility wins playoff games. Now let's revisit Max Clare, because this selection quietly carries long-term implications. Travis Kelce is still elite, but he is realistically one snap away from retirement at any point over the next year or two. You cannot replace a Hall of Famer overnight. What you can do is stagger the transition. Clare isn't being drafted to carry the offense in year 1. He's being drafted to absorb knowledge, refine route nuance, develop chemistry with Mahomes, and gradually assume responsibility. That's succession planning done correctly. Then comes Bud Clark, and this pick might be one of the more underappreciated moves in the entire exercise. 15 collegiate takeaways is not an accident. Ball skills translate. Instincts translate. If Brian Cook departs in free agency, Kansas City doesn't just replace a body. They potentially upgrade playmaking. Imagine a secondary that feeds off pressure from the front four and features a safety with proven ball production instincts. That synergy matters. Pressure creates hurried throws. Hurried throws create interception opportunities. And interceptions flip playoff momentum. This draft, as constructed in the simulation,